We've talked about A, B, and C, and now, of course, we're just left with our CWL previous champions from London and what they're going to be able to do in Pool D. Let's see how 100 Thieves will be able to handle teams like Gen.G, Team Envy, and Luminosity coming up. So as mentioned, again, 100 Thieves, the defending champions from CWL London, will be looking to repeat and retain their championship status, but they're going to have to go up against Gen.G and a couple of question marks as far as what we need to be expecting from teams like Envy and Luminosity. So let's talk a little bit more about it. If you missed the pool breakdown of Pool A, B, and C, make sure you go back and take a look at each of those. We also have done power rankings to kind of rank and predict what's going to be going into CWL Anaheim and where teams may finish, at least by my opinion. So let's just go ahead and start things off. Take a look at Pool D. Again, you'll be dealing with 100 Thieves, Envy, and Gen.G. This is a pool that, honestly, if you're looking at this from the perspective of 100 Thieves, you should, and I won't say have to, but you should win this pool 3-0, no problems. Their history against these teams, relatively one-sided. Gen.G, they've played twice to the tune of a 2-0 and a 6-3 in maps. Similar story for Team Envy, where they're able to go at a 6-1 map count over two previous engagements. And they have actually not played Luminosity yet. Not that it makes much of a difference, because this is a different Luminosity team now that Gunless is no longer there, and Ricky is subbing in and will be playing for them at Anaheim. Now, if I talk too much about 100 Thieves, it's just going to be blowing smoke, because honestly, how can you say anything bad about this squad? So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do it mostly in perspective of how does 100 Thieves match up in the specific game modes and combinations compared to the rest of the pool. This is the best respawn team in the game, both hardpoint as well as in control by map win-loss ratio and averages. This is the best team. 240.87 points on average per map played on hardpoint. That's nuts. They only give up an average of 191. That is a differential average of almost 50 points. That's silly. Actually silly that they typically will win their hardpoints by the tune of a 50-point win on average. That's insane. Their search and destroy has been where they're weakest, and honestly, this pool in specific is a little bit of a terrifying search and destroy pool, typically speaking, at least based on their total averages. However, Envy kind of ruins that because they don't win a single search for the last, 8 matches, and Luminosity has not done well there either in their most recent history. The fact of the matter is 100 Thieves holds the edge everywhere in this pool, with maybe the exception of search versus Gen.G. That's the only real question and only thing you could even possibly start to flex on. Technically, as far as the search and destroy goes, they are down to Gen.G. They've played them 3 times in S&D, and it's a 1-2 record, but it's perfect, essentially perfect everywhere else. So 100 Thieves, I think it's hard for you not to anticipate them to go 3-0 in this pool. Going over to Gen.G, though, this is an interesting conversation that we need to talk a lot about, because a lot of people are obviously writing them a little bit lower than I personally think they should be, simply because of how their 2 weeks of Division A went. After having that reverse sweep by them on 100 Thieves, they're not able to close out a Game 5 versus Optic, nor against Reciprocity, nor against UYU. They also lose badly against Evil Geniuses with an 0-3, as well as against FaZe Clan at a 1-3. In fact, during their Division A split, they only win 2 matches. That was a 3-0 versus Midnight and a 3-1 versus LG. They're not even able to beat UYU, which is the worst team in Division A. So a lot of question marks for this team. The impressive things about Gen.G is the fact that this team at one point in time was an incredible search and destroy squad, and they've fallen off lately to where they were 4-6 at Fort Worth, 4-3 at London, and they only won 4 search and destroys during the 2 weeks that they played in Division A, but they still have a 24-16 overall search and destroy record and one of the better search and destroy averages, which is simply tells me that this team, even though they're not winning out their searches, most of their losses are relatively close, and that holds mostly true. Mostly when they lose, it's to the tune of a 4-6 or a 5-6. There have been a couple of ugly losses where there's a couple of 2 6s and 1 6s in there, but they've never been fully blown out, and typically when they win more convincingly. So that's why that average, as you see it, is relatively close together, even though their most recent spree of search and destroy has not been very great. The simple fact of the matter is this is still a good search and destroy team by the perspective, if you say good in terms of the rest of the CWL teams. This is still a good team. My biggest question mark for this Gen.G team comes down to, Can they start to make sure that they're finding their dominance back in search, but also in at least one hardpoint mode? And then beyond that, can they find themselves to be a little bit better in the control? In specific, they went 3-4 during the divisional split in control. This was after they started off 4-0 in control in the London pools that consisted of Luminosity, Splice, and Denial there. So again, some familiarity here with Luminosity. 3-1 against that squad. 0-1 versus Envy. 0-2 versus 100 Thieves. Personally, I have high expectations for Gen.G. I think they'll be able to clean things up and turn things around. That's about as in-depth as I can get with that kind of conversation. Let's take a look at where things need to be really considered in Team Envy, because there's a lot of things to talk about with Envy, simply because their win-loss ratio is good versus Luminosity. Actually, they went to Game 5 both times they played each other, a 6-4 in the maps after winning out the 2 matches in particular. They were able to find a 3-1 win versus Gen.G, and they've been mostly blown out by 100 Thieves. Now again, that 3-1 win versus Gen.G actually came in the losers bracket of London. This was the team that knocked out Gen.G just to make them finish in the top, what was that, 6, I think, at that point. So if you're Team Envy, you've got some success against these teams, but again, you don't have a lot of success going into this from not only the search perspective. Again, they did not win a single search over their 7 matches. It actually dates back to an 8th when they played E United at London. But beyond that, during their 7 matches of control during Division B, they only won 2 control maps. A 3-1 versus the Nile and a 3-0 versus the Heretics. Everything else was a 1. They had 2 2-3 losses, I guess, technically, but there was 2 ugly control losses to Elevate and Splice, as well as 1 to 100 Thieves. So this Team Envy team is just baffling to me, because this is a team that looks so strong in their losers bracket run. In fact, they almost made a run at E United at one point in time, simply because they were able to beat E United in pools 3-1. You thought that they might have a little bit of workout going for them in the losers bracket versus E United at London. That didn't happen. But my biggest question mark is, which Envy are we going to get? I'm just sick of trying to predict this team. You just never know what's going to happen. Sometimes they look incredible, but is it just on a daily basis? Like, if they just don't show up on Sunday, is this team an absolute embarrassment when it came to London? Because technically, at London, they lost to FaZe and Evil Geniuses. So that means if they would have lost that game to Enigma 6 in the losers bracket round 1, which they almost did, by the way, this team would have gone 1-4, and they wouldn't, I don't even think, be in the top 12 conversation for anybody. But they were able to have that magical run, finishing 4th at London, and you're wondering if this team will be able to do it again here. Personally, based on this pool, I don't see it happening. I do not see them getting into the winners bracket again, so they're going to have to make another losers bracket run, simply because I don't see them beating Gen.G or 100 Thieves, unless, again, like I mentioned, they come out and have a hot Friday. Maybe they can take one of those 2 games, if not both of them. I just don't see them on any given day being able to take either of them down consistently, which is why I have them sitting essentially in the 3rd spot place. And honestly, you have to be a little bit worried about Luminosity, because as we talk about them, a lot of people have been kind of throwing Luminosity all over their predictions radar. I ranked them 15th in my power rankings, but I actually think this team can finish top 12, if not higher, simply because I do not have them getting out of pools in the winners bracket, but I see them winning at least one losers bracket matchup, if not a second. It just depends on who they play up against, honestly, because if they're against other teams that are kind of sitting in that same power rankings range of 16, I would say even to 12, this is a team that I think can win those matches and could potentially put themselves in a favorable spot to finish top 12, if not top 8. The biggest thing for this team is the fact that they have not looked good at all in hardpoint. You talked about Envy not being able to win a single search and destroy. This Luminosity team did not win a single hardpoint in the 2 weeks of the Division A split. That's an embarrassment. On top of that, their search and destroy, they only won a single search and destroy map. That was against Gen.G, and it took them around 11 to do it. They had looked okay in the control, but this at one point in time was the best control team in the game. You go up until Fort Worth and just through it, they'd only lost, I think, like 2 control rounds through the entirety of Fort Worth. That's insane. Since then, they've done essentially nothing but lose. In fact, if I were to count them really quickly, they've only won, since Fort Worth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 control matches. Big question marks. The good news for Luminosity is that Formal's running a Maddox, and he looks very good with it. He's kind of like in the same situation that Temp is when he runs the Maddox. He's a good player running a very strong weapon where your playmaker, you want your playmaker to run the Maddox because you can take long-range engagements if you're nutty, and obviously you can win up some close-range engagements, and you can find the singing kind of tune of that Maddox is in the mid-range. So you want your playmaker on the MDX. And honestly, with Gunless gone and maybe the inner turmoil started sifting away, I can see Luminosity having a better performance than they did with some practice. Again, Ricky on the AR spot, he is a notable player with a lot of extensive history. So do not write him out because he's the coach, now turned sub, now turned starter. He still is a very good player. I just didn't personally think he played all that well during the PLQ and in this title specifically. But with an AR, maybe he's going to find some safety and be able to find themselves a little bit of more success. The biggest question mark is, where do you play? Because you have to essentially go to maps that are AR friendly. Otherwise, I think you're going to get beat up in this pool just simply because the SOG line has not looked good. Slacked has been just okay. John has just been okay. And I don't think there's enough improvement that'd be merited for them to take too many sets. So as far as this pool goes, I have 100 Thieves going 3-0 in this pool, Gen.G going 2-1, Envy going 1-2, and Luminosity going 0-3. It could be the other way around, though. It could be Envy not winning a game. It could be Envy winning 2 games. I just personally think that 100 Thieves and Gen.G are the 2 favorites in this pool, and rightfully so, based on the fact that there's no momentum across multiple game modes for both Envy as well as for Luminosity. There's a lot of things they would have had to work out and really work on if they wanted to improve. Personally, I think if there were to be a surprise in this pool, I think a lot of people are just kind of writing off Luminosity too early. A lot of their hardpoint losses, even though they didn't win a single one, were above the 225 mark. So they're close in a number of ways, just not quite able to get there. But again, there's so many things they have to work on. Same thing for Team Envy. So many things they have to work on that it's just going to be, I think, too much for them to overcome in such a short amount of time. So that'll wrap things up as far as our pool breakdowns for you guys. That'll be also my last video going through CWL Anaheim. If you're not already following me on Twitter, I don't want to announce it here in the video as I'm recording it because I don't know when this is going to get announced, but you want to stay tuned to my Twitter to find out why I will not be doing any kind of CWL recaps throughout Anaheim. But beyond that, we will be coming back with a couple of other small breakdown videos just to kind of upload throughout the weekend of Anaheim, but we'll also be doing power rankings at the end of Anaheim. So if you haven't gone back and already looked at my predictions and power rankings, make sure you do it. Again, we're so close to 10K subs. I would love to hit it before the weekend. So if you can, if you're already out there and you're watching and you like the content, please consider hitting that subscription button and ringing that notification bell to know when my videos do in fact go live. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed the event, and until next time, hope you all keep holding it down. Later, bye-bye.